Domain, hosting, website. Now, those are 3 words that we say on an endless loop at MayeCreate, and they're incredibly intangible, but they're also really important for your business. And these words turn even our most savvy clients into a question factory. What is a domain? How do you get one? How do you connect it to everything? What the heck is hosting? Do I need it? And how do I know which kind I need? Those are all super valid questions. So let's unravel the role of your domain name and domain registrar, and then move on to decode hosting. I'll explain the different types so you know exactly which one you need, and explain how your website touches it all and brings it all together. So let's start at the top. Like, what even is a domain name? Okay, well, people often refer to their domain name as their web address or their URL. URL is short for Uniform Resource Locator, and it's a purchasable, unique string of characters usually related to your business that allows people to get to your website, your email, and any other assets that are attached to the domain. And I'll explain what those assets are in just a minute. So MayeCreate.com, for example, is a domain name. So where do you buy a domain name since they're purchasable? How do I get one? Well, you can purchase domain names from a company called a domain registrar. We work almost exclusively with GoDaddy, but we've also worked with Name.com, Network Solutions, and 2Cows. Now, different domain registrars may offer different domain extensions like .blog, .io, or .design, but the main extensions like .com, .org, or .net are available at almost every registrar. And if you're in the middle of picking a domain name that's stuck and you're not really sure which direction to go, check out our podcast and blog post combo, How to Pick a Domain Name That Doesn't Suck, where we reminisce about some really bad ones and give you some tips to get a really good one for your company. So earlier I said that your domain name directs your digital assets. So how does that work? Well, it can direct your digital business assets like your email, any subdomains, and your main website. Stacy at our office, who's our local domain expert, she always says to think about your domain name like a roundabout. Your domain name is in the middle of the roundabout, and a thing called DNS is the map of your domain name, and it tells you which exit to get off on for what. Now, the most common exits are your A record, which is what goes to your website. It points to an IP address, and that little IP address is what tells the internet where to find your website. The MX record, that goes to your email. And when somebody sends you an email, the internet has to know where to send it. So it's also connected to a set of numbers and letters that tells your email where to be routed to. And then hopefully it comes to your inbox. Now, here's my big piece of advice to you. Make sure you figure out where your digital assets live, especially if you already have a domain name that's attached to your email, before you take your website live, or you will lose all of the emails from the time that you switch it until the time that you fix it. Because when you propagate your domain name, it can take anywhere between hours to days to propagate. So you're not going to know it's broken until it's too late, and all that email will be lost in cyberspace forever. Ask me how I know. Oh, yes. Okay, so on to a happier topic. Let's talk about web hosting. So what is web hosting? Now, we said that your domain name is like your address, and web hosting, that's kind of like your website's home. It's the spot where the DNS roundabout drops people off to see your website. It can be a dorm room, a condo, or a mansion with a swimming pool and a basketball court. Depending upon what type of house you need for your website, that's the type of hosting that you'll get. Now, most businesses rent their hosting from a hosting company. Once again, think of your hosting as your website home. All right, so the first type of hosting is the most economical. It's called shared hosting. I think about this like a dorm room. Each room inside the dormitory facilitates hosting for another website, but they all share the same resources like power and water. It's by far, like I said, the most economical solution. But the tricky thing about shared hosting is server resources, like dorm resources, are limited. So there's only a certain amount of hot water to go around, and when the hot water's gone, it's gone. So the server only offers a certain amount of power, memory, and bandwidth dedicated to hosting all those websites. So if one website experiences a spike in traffic or is hogging resources because it's hacked, all the sites on the server are going to feel the pinch. So we don't suggest shared hosting beyond super, super small websites. If you need your site to be up and running without fail, you'll want to look for a VPS hosting provider. Now, VPS hosting providers are not super, super expensive. A lot of them start around $20 a month and will facilitate a really decent sized website within it. VPS stands for Virtual Private Server, and most of our clients use this style of hosting. It's like a condo, and each unit has its own resources. It has its own hot water heater and utilities, but you're probably sharing something like a driveway with your neighbor, right? So a VPS has some pooled resources, but the important ones are separated and allocated to each unit, making it more stable and an ideal solution for most websites that aren't big bad mamma jammas. So most e-commerce sites, learning management systems, blogs, and members-only sections thrive without an issue in a VPS hosting environment. Now, if you do have a big bad mamma jamma of a website, you might need to get dedicated hosting or a mansion with a pool. So if you have a busy e-commerce website, you have a software application, or a site with just a boatload of traffic, you will need more resources on the daily than a VPS hosting solution can provide. And in those situations, we would suggest dedicated hosting. So in our example, I know I'm saying that dedicated hosting is a mansion with a pool, but really it's whatever type of house that you need. So you get to decide how many resources you need with dedicated hosting. It's designed just for you and your website. Now, dedicated hosting can be expensive. It could be well over $200 a month, sometimes even more. But a lot of hosting companies allow you to flex your site into a larger account when you need it. So, for example, a music festival site or an online store at Christmas might need to spring for a dedicated hosting space during their busy season, but can totally run on a VPS for the rest of the year. So we manage a few sites that we transfer to a dedicated environment during their busy times of year to ensure that they're up and they're rolling when they're needed most. So in a nutshell, the difference between domain and hosting is your domain is your address and your hosting is your house. So now, how does this all come together to display your website? Great question. Now, your website is composed of many assets mixed together by the server and displayed for users in a browser. So I think of it kind of like baking a cake. The first step to baking a cake is to mix all the ingredients together. And then once all the ingredients are blended, you need heat to facilitate the chemical reaction needed to transform them into a cake. Otherwise, they're just batter, right? So think of all the assets needed to build your website. HTML, images, CSS, PHP, JavaScript, your database, those are all ingredients. Now you're hosting the server that it's on, and the browser that the user is using are the oven that bakes the cake and serves it to the visitor. So when someone types in your domain name in their browser or searches for a term in Google that pulls up your site in search results, it pings the server. And when the user pulls up your site, the server and the browser mix the ingredients together and bake the cake. So when you have the right hosting plan and the right ingredients for your website, the cake gets baked quickly and perfectly every time. But when you have the wrong hosting space or the wrong ingredients, your cake is going to be gross, and parts of it might be cooked and other parts might just be weird batter blobs. Definitely not ideal. So the moral of the story is, if you set up your domain name correctly and make sure you get a decent home for your website, you're about 2/3 of the way to an awesome cake. So hopefully, my friends, now you know the difference between domain, hosting, and website. You know where to get your domain and also what type of hosting you might be looking for to get the website that you need. Check out more resources just like this over at MayeCreate.com or follow us on Marketing with Purpose, our podcast that you can also see right here on YouTube.